We are participating in a ritual called voting that are legitimizing the current party system. And there is the concern. And I don't want your listeners and viewers to get this wrong. Voting is the biggest and most powerful tool that we have, but we should use it to undermine the party system, not legitimize this broken system that does not work for the wider people. It's more like a corporate dinner. You turn up at a venue and there's only two mains, and one of them is vegetarian. Or three maximum. That's not real choice. That's illusion of choice. It's been curated.
People say drain the swamp. Well, that's different. That's the politicians. But when you look at actually who's in D.C., who's moving things, who's doing things, every church in the United States has to have an office in D.C. Every nonprofit has to have, we are the hub of everything, and we don't have a vote.
We have been divided into two great parties. There's a great book by Liliana Mason I mention all the time, refer to. She explains how parties deliberately fused political identity with the cultural identity and created what she calls mega identities. And each side sees the other as existential threat.
What do we do next? Here's a man who built businesses from the ground up, watched how money and power interact up close, and came away with a question that wouldn't let him go. Why does it feel like nothing actually changes no matter who wins? Metin Pekin earns his BA in political economy from the University of Greenwich and then spent decades as a serial entrepreneur, founding and scaling companies across industries. But the more he succeeded in business, the clearer a troubling pattern became. Inequality deepened, surveillance expanded, whistleblowers got punished, wars continued, and the people trying to make real change, the genuine reformers, kept getting pushed aside by party insiders who controlled who could even run for power in the first place. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That observation became a book. His Gold Award-winning debut, Breaking Democracy's Chains, is a rigorously researched, unflinching argument that true democracy can't emerge until we break the grip of political parties and return power to ordinary people. He calls it a no-party democracy, and he's thought through exactly how it would work. Metin isn't interested in left versus right. He's interested in something deeper, how citizens reclaim genuine representation in a system that's become very good at looking democratic while functioning like something else. So today we're going to find out what he thinks what we should do next. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed. Pleased to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation because I think that you're saying a lot of things on everybody's mind, right? You know, this no party democracy, is coming up quite a bit. In fact, a few people that I've interviewed who are running here in the United States are running under no party, and for a lot of different reasons. So before we get into all of that, how did you go from entrepreneur to democracy critic? You built companies. Somewhere in there you started seeing a pattern that disturbed you. So what did you see that most people don't?
Yes, I've been fortunate enough to make a success in business. I've studied political economy at Greenwich University, and there I was exposed to various governing systems, including socialism. So although it's kind of a demonized now, but we were exposed to different forms of democracy, different governing systems, and what have you. So you have that in back of your mind, and you go into business, yes, you succeed. And then obviously we all participate in politics in one way or another, at the very least, when it comes to every few years, when it comes to the elections. We go out there and cast our vote. What I've realized is that I come from a working background, so I've family have always voted for the Labour Party, and I've ended up, it's your equivalent of your Democrats, and I've ended up doing that as well on one or two elections. Then the Iraq War happened. So there you were with the Republican president, a right-wing president, George W. Bush, teaming up with a Democrat, as we call it, Labour in United Kingdom, going to a war that had no real proof of weapons of mass destruction, resulted in, according to some estimates, about 1 million Iraqis, thousands of American sons and daughters, hundreds of British sons and daughters. To what end is the question? And then you sit back and say, there's a problem here. There's a problem here because it's not a voter issue. It's not politicians' issue. It's a structural issue. So now it's kind of became more uncomfortable for me to say, well, I'm not going to vote for anybody. I've voted for the Conservatives as well, by the way, so I have drifted to the right a bit as well, because like the policy is a bit better, so I have voted on both sides, but strictly looking at their policies. And then I became really disappointed with both sides and said, I need to go back to the drawing board here. There is a problem here. And in business, you quickly realize, Molly, that if you want different outcomes, you can't just change people. You really need to change systems. You need to change incentives. Changing faces isn't going to change the outcomes. And this is what we've been having over the recent decades. Now, if you take one or two issues that impact our lives, one or two policies that impact our lives every day, austerity, war, surveillance, the question to your audience would be, what is the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats here? Well, wars happened under Obama, under Biden, Democrats, happened under Clinton, Democrat, happened under Republicans, Bush, you name it, come all the way to Donald Trump. Still happening, one happening now. The Strait of Hormuz was completely open, and we were paying less for the gasoline. And now he's trying to get that strait opened so that the gasoline prices can come back. So the question to your audience is that, well, we vote reds, we get purple. We vote blues, we still get purple. So there's not a lot between them. And this is what kind of pushed me to say, there's got to be something wrong here. There's, I've had 3 decades in the business as a business person. I needed to look at the root cause analysis. And when I've started researching this in more depth, I came across the Federalist Papers. And when I've read the Federalist Papers, and I've noticed that American founding fathers were dead against the political parties and against factions, it was almost a bit of a eureka moment to say, well, I think your conclusion is right here, because it's not a new phenomenon, it's not a new problem. 250 years ago, the founders of world's leading democracy have grappled with the same problem. I think John Adams said, there is nothing which I dread so much as division of the republic into two great parties. Thomas Jefferson, I think he said, if I could not go to heaven but with a party, I would not go there at all. I would rather not go there. So you can see how anti-party, anti-faction the founding fathers were. But somehow they found their way into our democracies. And today, the left is blaming the right is blaming the left. We're fighting one another, arguing over cultural policies. But when it comes to the key issues that affect our lives, surveillance continues under both parties, austerity continues under the both parties. Take 2008 economic crash. The banks were the responsible, they were the guilty party for this. They were responsible for all that. Subprime mortgages and other dodgy dealings that they've had going on.
The real fraud, waste, and abuse. Because I was in real estate finance and subprime lending in 2002 to 2006. And you want to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse? There it was.
Well, there we are. And what did we do? Our politicians, our leaders, very quickly forgave the banks because they worked for them. And they have bailed them out to the tune of 700 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And then what did they do to the general public? Austerity. You need to be responsible. These guys are too big to fail. This system is too big to fail. So, and that continued under Obama as well. So whether it's Republicans, whether it's the Democrats, there's really not that much difference between them. Only cultural differences. And there is to deliberately pit the population against one another so that we're pointing fingers at each other rather than pointing the finger up to say who's pulling the strings here. And that's what led me to write Breaking Democracy's Chains. And I think the eureka moment was, as I've said earlier, stumbling onto Founding Fathers or Federalist Papers and seeing how they were against the political parties. So that became the theme. And I said, well, what do we do if we take political parties out? What happens? How do they enter the system? Why are they seen to be part of the system? Because they're cause of all evil as far as the democracy goes. They're the cause of democratic decay in our systems. That's my view, and that's what the book portrays.
Well, I agree, especially when you look at the United States. At one point we switched. The Democrats became the Republicans and the Republicans became the Democrats. So it's really like so convoluted, right? I lived in North Carolina briefly, and I was living in a very interesting place. I was like, why are there all these Confederate everythings? And so I started researching. I'm like, oh, this is the last holdout of the Confederacy, and so I learned that at one point it was the Republicans that had, black people running and doing all these things, and the Democrats were the ones that went down to the city hall and burned it and burned all the records, like Tulsa style, right? And so, and I was like, wait, what? It really just, it kind of rattles your cage a little bit, and you go, well, hold on, what am I missing? And I think in the States, we get really upset when people say, like, wings of the same bird or whatever that, right? But, like, from a perspective of the people, like, we are not, like, we want wildly different things, right? But the problem is that the people controlling both of those parties are wings of the same bird, not the people themselves, because we do have different party platform issues. But at the end of the day, when you got like Cory Booker or Chuck Schumer, who's controlling the Democratic Party and not listening to the will of the Democrats in the United States, You know, that's where we get into, okay, well, now maybe I understand why we don't want two parties. Now I understand there's 8 people controlling both parties right now, you know, and it makes me wonder, do Republicans feel the same way? Do they look at their leadership and go, this isn't what we wanted either? You know, the news wants to show us everybody who's saying, yeah, we voted for this. But I think they're more of a minority than anything else, but we're not getting what we're voting for.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, this needs to be said. There are some very good people in Democratic movement, in Republican movement, that are genuine people that wants to do the best for the country. But like you've said, it's the politician, it's the party bosses, and it's not even them, they're the puppets. It's who actually does the funding.
Right.
So
that's
funding,
the elephant in the room right there, is where's the money coming from? Who's holding the bag?
Exactly. You see, once the parties are in power, they've got all the government levers. And they pass any law, any legislation. So this is what I mean by gatekeeping. This is what I mean by illusion of choice. Now, I use this example. The real choice, if we were to use an analogy, the real choice would look like something like this. We want to go for a dinner. We choose a cuisine, we choose a food type. We have plenty of choice in every city that we're in. Whether we want Japanese, whether we want Indian, Chinese, steakhouse, pizza, Italian, whatever we want. Lebanese, you name it. We have a choice. And then when we turn up at the restaurant, we're given a menu. And then there's a big choice in there. We choose any main we want, any starter we want, and the rest of it. Any drink we want. Compare that to the political choice we have. It's more like a corporate dinner. You turn up at a venue and there's only 2 mains. And one of them is vegetarian. Or 3 maximum. That's not real choice. That's illusion of choice. It's been curated. So we are not given a choice. Before we even go to the ballot box, the list is filtered. And then we are told you have a choice of A and B, reds or blues or whatever it is. And that is the choice that we're getting. And we call that democracy. Well, I'm afraid that's hollowed out democracy. Yes, we have a choice. But it's not a real choice. But the problem does not end there. The problem is much deeper. Much, much deeper. The policies that come up for voting in the House, in the Senate, are drawn up by the think tanks outside the government. And who finances these think tanks? Same people, same billionaire class, same entrenched elite that finances the parties. So they will deliberately leave all these loopholes in it for the rich to exploit when it comes to taxation, when it comes to any area, businesses and what have you. So these policies come in to the Senate, to the House of Representatives, and guess what? There is no representative there that is free to vote with his or her conscience in the best interest of the public, in the best interest of their candidates. They have to toe the party line. They will have to vote the way they're told to vote. Vote with the party, or your career will quickly come to an end. One example that I would like to use here from United Kingdom is a ex-minister from Conservative Party, Rory Stewart, in his whether it was in his book or one of his podcasts. He said, I call this a zombie party because we never read the legislation. We're told which way to vote and we just press the button. So how can we square this up with democracy? So we get filtered choice, we get policies written by the rich, and our representatives are told to vote for it to become law. Where is democracy in that? And there are so many other problems with the system that we could go on about it all day long. You know, how the primaries work, you know, how there are so few swing states that decide the elections. 80% of the votes don't really matter. The emphasis, you know, the gerrymandering, you name it, all these problems are problems that cannot be fixed within the party system that even the founding fathers had dreaded 250 years ago. A valid question might be, well, if they dread it, if they hated it so much, why did we end up with these parties? Well, it's simple. Out of necessity. Out of necessity because they lived in a very different era. 250 years back. Try to cast your mind back and look at some of the Western films. It was the horse and the cart, the Wild West, you name it. There was no internet, there was no television, there was no social media, no print press even, no radios. So communication was very, very primitive. Information was not readily available. Fast forward 250 years, we have instant communication, abundance of information. In fact, we are overflooded, with information, overloaded with information. So this day and age, there's no room for parties to insert themselves between the voters and their representatives. So that's the view I put across in Breaking Democracy's Chains, because democracy is captive. It's in chains. In those chains put onto it by the wealthy individuals, wealthy corporations, wealthy special interest groups that look after only their own interests, not in the best interest of the people. But they get us to perform a ritual. We're performing a ritual to legitimize the existing system. This reminds me of an essay by Václav Havel in Czech Republic under socialism in Czechoslovakia. In his famous essay, he says there was a sign in this greengrocer's window. Every morning he'll put a sign up there that says, "Workers of the world unite." But he stopped believing it. He no longer believed it. He may have done it at some point, but he no longer believed in that slogan. But he did it in any case. He did it to get along. He did it because everybody else, every shop on every street displayed that sign. So it became a ritual. And Václav Havel says, well, it's not just the oppression of the system that sustained it. It was the participation of the people in that ritual that helped that system endure for so long. And I'm afraid we are participating in a ritual called voting that are legitimizing the current party system. And there is the concern. And I don't want your listeners and viewers to get this wrong. Voting is the biggest and most powerful tool that we have, but we should use it to undermine the party system, not legitimize this broken system that does not work for the wider people.
Well, I agree with that. I'm a DC girl. We have it right on our license plate, taxation without representation. And let me tell you, we are, and I'm going to toot our own horn, but DC is full of the most intelligent, the most progressive, the most international, the most educated, and the most experienced people in the world. In the world, and we pay the highest taxes. Right, and people say drain the swamp. Well, that's different. That's the politicians. But when you look at actually who's in D.C., who's moving things, who's doing things, every church in the United States has to have an office in D.C. Every nonprofit has to have, we are the hub of everything, and we don't have a vote. So you want to talk about participating in a ritual? There's no point in me voting. 94% of us voted for not Trump in the last 2 elections or 3, whatever. You know what I mean? We didn't even really like Hillary, but 94% of us still voted for her because we knew it was the only choice. But it didn't matter at all. At all. The place where government is made, the place where people probably inherently understand government better than everywhere else in the United States, and our vote does not matter. It's not worth the piece of paper it's printed on.
That's the problem. That is the problem. That exactly is where the problem is. So this is why I argue that tinkering around the edges with these reforms isn't going to solve the problem, because the problem is structural and it needs to be resolved. It needs to be dealt with an engineering head on, with an engineering hat on, to say, where is it broken? Why is it broken? Where are the incentives? How can we change the incentives? And this is what I kind of try to thoroughly explain in my book. And let's not lose hope, because people have brought down kingdoms. Mm-hmm. When people are educated and united, they can make a difference, and they will make a difference, and they will change the systems. So, and what I propose in the book is this. We need to, like the founding fathers had said, we need to get rid of the party monopoly on representation. Because like they have predicted, we have been divided into 2 great parties. There's a great book by Liliana Mason, I mention all the time, refer to. She explains how parties deliberately fused political identity with the cultural identity and created what she calls mega identities. And each side sees the other as existential threat. So when we come to vote, we don't vote what's best for us. We vote to keep other side out. If you're a Democrat and you're not happy with the Democrats, you're still voting for Democrats to keep the Republicans out. And if you're a Republican, you see that as existential threat, and you don't vote because you agree with what Republicans are doing. You just want to keep the Democrats out. That's not democracy. So let's kind of say, okay, well and good, what is the solution? We all know what the problem is.
Right.
And everybody stumbles, they eloquently put forward what the problems are, but people rarely come up with a realistic solution.
What do we do next? Yeah.
What do we do next? Exactly. What a name, what a fitting name. So, here is what we can do. Imagine for a moment, and do question it at every level. Imagine this for a scenario. We elect our representatives, all 435 of them, without a party label. Now, let's assume that I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, vice versa. Now, the candidate we choose will, or the candidates we want to vote for, they will have their top 5-10 pledges on a government website in our constituency. So we can go on there and have a look at who the candidates are, and then they will have their top 10 pledges. They can say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I am pro-abortion, I'm anti-abortion, I'm pro-immigration, I'm anti-immigration, I'm this, I'm the other, whatever it is. This is what I'm going to fight for. I'm going to fight for, releasing Kennedy files, Epstein files, or I'm going to not do it, whatever it is. They can put their top 10 pledges in there, their views on taxation, on everything. So we have an informed choice. And we don't have to have every voter to become a political genius or informed person. Right. Just like we choose a lawyer when we end up in a court. We'll choose a representative.
American Idol.
Yes, absolutely. We choose somebody that best represents our priorities, let's call it. Now, we have a real choice now. Going back to the restaurant example, we have a real choice. And those people who stand as candidates for our representation, one might say, well, you might end up with hundreds of those people. Yes, you could, but there's a very practical solution, very easy solution. To become a serious contender, you will need to secure 0.5% of the local votes.
Right.
And that's it.
Simple.
So then it narrows down to 6 serious contenders with different views. So freedom of association, any group can support any candidate and so on and so forth, not a problem. But let's now say we've got a proper choice versus a curated choice under the current system. We now have a real choice. We have nurses, doctors, business people, podcasters, whoever that we think is going to best represent us. We vote for that person. Let's now assume every constituency did their voting and we have 435 representatives in the House, in the legislature. The next stage will be to choose our commander-in-chief, the president. So anybody can, under the current constitution, anybody that can qualify can put their name forward. But the criteria will shift from money and caucuses to the representative we've sent there. They will have to get a number of representatives to back their candidacy. So if we have, the criteria is you must have a minimum of 10 representatives vouching for you, then that's the criteria. It could be 20, it could be 50. Now you have a list of presidential candidates. Through public debates and round of voting by our representatives, they narrow the list down to 2 finalists. So those 2 finalists then go to a nationwide national election with their running mates. The winning ticket becomes the executive. He or she becomes the president, and hopefully will be able to select the first female president of the United States under this system. The runner-up assumes the role, and is mandated by the people, assumes the role of minority leader. So their job is not to interfere with the executive. Their role will be, he or she will set up the shadow cabinet.
Right.
They will dissect the policies being put forward. They will inform our representatives on alternatives, on the flows in the policies, and our representatives then make an informed judgment which way they're going to vote. They will consult us. They will work in the best interest of us. There's no party bosses or whips to whip them to vote in any way. They're accountable to the voters. So the accountability is not upwards anymore. It's outwards to the voter. And that way, we are going to have coalitions formed issue by issue. And where we get the majority, the policies will become legislation. Where we don't, they will have to modify it, ratify it, and debate it, and make sure that it's acceptable to the most people. The same constitution, same institutions, and everything else stays in place, whether it's the judiciary and any other. We just want to make the system more democratic and take the monopoly of these party institutions which became money hungry, that constantly, like vampires, sucking money out and working in the best interest of the donors, in the best interest of the financiers. And that's what we do not want. I mean, how much more democratic would that system be? Yes, admittedly, these people in power are not going to let go of that power.
No.
They not willingly, not out of not out of decency. No, correct. They add billions to their coffers every cycle. I mean, what's going to happen is going to come from the grassroots. So if we stop voting, no matter how much money they spend, if we educate ourselves and we stop voting for either party and instead vote for the independents, what's going to happen? Their legitimacy becomes questionable. We're now saying, well, public is not mandating you. But as it is, the surveys show that 45% of American adults are not Democrats or Republicans. They are independent.
We're disillusioned. Yeah, we're very disillusioned by the whole thing, you know?
Absolutely correct. 45% is they identify as being independent. Not Democrats, not Republicans. That's bigger than both parties put together. They're under 20% each, apparently. So you square that up, square that circle.
Right.
So we need to move towards a better system that's practical and that's possible. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's utopian. Well, hang on a minute. When did the women in America get their voting rights? 1920.
Right.
Some 140, 150 years after men suffrage, after men were voting. For those 150 years.
It wasn't even signed into law for women until much, much later than that. It was in the 70s.
Yeah, precisely. So for those years, for those a century and a half, a lot of people said, well, that's utopian. Women's places in the house, bringing kids up and what have you. So what may seem utopian now, it really is a natural progression of the democracy.
I think our biggest thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is getting the money out. I mean, I saw yesterday, I can't remember who, but somebody won some race, and they won simply because they don't take AIPAC money, and it was a huge disruption in a very small and relatively insignificant place. But I think it signals to something bigger. You know, even being from D.C. and being politically educated, I didn't know about AIPAC. I didn't have any idea how entrenched in Israel we were. I just didn't, you know what I mean? And I'll admit it, I'm sure I'll get canceled for this, but when a lot of people were saying like free Palestine, I felt like it was just like muddying the waters, you know what I mean? I didn't totally understand. It was like, I'm with that, but like we have to make sure that we don't lose this election to Trump. And it just felt like a distraction. But now it's like, well, wait a minute. No, I was wrong. I was 100% wrong on that. Like it's the crux of everything. It's the core of everything. And people just don't know. How do you expect some guy in a trailer park in Arkansas to understand what AIPAC is and what money's being spent and what bombs were dropping? You know, I reposted it this morning where a senator was grilling Elon or somebody and said, you know, over 500,000 people have died because of our cuts to U.S. aid. And he said, no, you know, I'm not aware. And he said, well, let me break it down for you. That's the equivalent of if you walk through this country, you would see a dead child every 30 feet.
Yeah.
You know, and so, it does matter. At 100, like we have so much blood on our hands between Iran and Lebanon and Gaza and everything else because of our affiliation with Israel. And I just really think that we are, as a nation, really waking up to that right now and realizing how entrenched they are in our government. And so I guess my question would be, how do we get the money out of politics? Because as somebody who's on the end of it, right, you know, and I've said this before, so sorry to my listeners, but, you know, you just get sick of like, oh, I'm going to change things, send me $5. And it's like, I can't fill up my tank, man. I can't eat. and you need money, but the rub is that they need the money because they're competing against AIPAC. And so there is going to have to be a shift of regular everyday citizens deciding to put some of their money behind the people that they want and not just let the people with all the money control these elections. But what a terrible time to do that, because everybody's struggling right now. This is not the time for people to be digging into their pockets to fund elections. But at the end of the day, that $5 donation really goes a long way, because if you want to run for office, you got to have a manager, you got to have an office, you got to buy flyers. Just to get the list of registered voters in your county from the Democratic Party is $6,000 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it is not a cheap game. You know what I mean? You got to have some money going into it. So where is that line where it's like people have to contribute? Do we have to outspend AIPAC? Because that doesn't feel realistic. But like, where is that line? Because I think a lot of people are really waking up and going, wait, what's going on? How much money have they? You know, they gave Kamala Harris $5 million, AIPAC. $5 million. Cory Booker said to Jennifer on I've Had It podcast that he has gotten an insignificant amount of money. $900,000. You give him any American $900,000 and you tell them this is an insignificant amount of money, they're going to laugh you all the way to the car dealership. You know what I mean? It's not an insignificant amount of money, Cory Booker, you giant disconnected fool. Are you kidding me? Insignificant amount of money, 900,000. So how do we do it? How do we do it? What do we do next?
Yeah. What do we do next? Well, one of the proposals that I have in Breaking Democracy's Chains is this. Democracy is for sure being distorted by big money, by dark money. So how do we overcome that problem? Well, one solution that I propose, and it's not the only one, it's got to be obviously debated by people and other systems or other policies that needs to be devised. Why don't we tax political donations and have that in a separate pot and then use that to level the playing field? So if $5 million have been donated to a candidate or to a party, wherever it's gone, that's not participation. That's buying influence. That's not civic participation. So we treat it as such. Let's call the spade a spade. So progressively tax it, like income tax. If I'm on $50,000, I'm taxed at, let's say, 20%. If I'm on $250,000, I'm taxed at 40%. If I'm on $500,000 then I'm taxed probably 45%. So, higher. The tax rate progressively goes up as your income goes up. Why don't we do that to the money in politics to clean politics up? So that if somebody donates 900 or 100,000, it's taxed at 20%. If it goes to $1 million, it's at 30%. If it goes to 5 billion, it's at 30%, 40%, and so on and so forth, up to 50%. So now we can take that money and use it for democracy alone, not send it to Ukraine or Israel, but use it for democracy alone, and level the playing field so we get true representation. That is one proposal in the book. But the wider problem is this. We're on the same page regarding the money, and the money has money amplifies the message. Money amplifies message more than in one way. There's multiple ways that it does it, because this has been a gradual decay in the democracy. It hasn't happened overnight. It hasn't happened just because of one policy. Now, what had happened? Money has captured political parties, their leadership, through funding, and then indirectly they had their hands on the government levers. They have passed legislation to create the current landscape, the current media landscape that we're in. It's concentrated in 5 or 6 ends. And, Facebook, Meta is in the hands of Zuckerberg. They decide through algorithms more efficiently than ever before what content is pushed up, what content is expressed through algorithms. So they set the agenda of the debate. They set what we debate. Mainstream media has got rid of the real journalists, and they've only got people that, journalists that are not real journalists that hold the government to account. They're basically protecting the government. So the money corrupted the system so much so that it's not just the government, it's into the media, it's into the judiciary, it's into the education. So, we are being educated in an obedient way, not in a critical thinking way. When was the last time your audiences discussed, do we have a decent form of democracy? No. It's, charismatic leaders. Trump said this, Biden said this, Kamala Harris said this. So we are debating petty things that being pushed up through the media. So money through media, money through politicians, penalizing the real journalists like Julian Assange. I mean, they've turned his life into a living hell for just doing his journalism, for publishing what government is not supposed to do. Illegal surveillance, illegal torture. So money has bought out the media, and media has created the landscape for the Iraq war. Because even it was the left-wing papers that justified the war under false pretense. There was no weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein was an American agent. He always worked. He's overthrown his government. So he became a problem. They just wanted to get rid of him. For the fuel companies, they wanted more petrol, more gasoline. That's all it is. And they did that in Venezuela. But there's a justification for it because the media justifies it. We're fast moving towards a dystopian society where they call wars military action. They call kinetic action. They kill people and say, oh, it's unalived or neutralized. They say they have, censorship, and they say content moderation. And, you can't say this, you can't say the other. You cannot criticize Benjamin Netanyahu or the Likud party. Well, that's not democracy. Where is freedom of speech? I should be able to criticize anybody, any government official, any government, without any consequences. Without fear, absolutely. And yet, everybody comes on media, social media, and say they've been threatened by it. They lost their jobs. They've been unaired by it, and they've done this. So there is a serious problem here that people have got to dig their heads out of the sand and say, look, I, as a citizen, have a duty to not take for granted what our ancestors had left us, this precious thing called democracy. We need to grab it by both ends and not let it slip any further, because otherwise we're going to move towards this dystopian society where it's democracy in name only, not in substance.
Well, I heard that. So before we wrap up, a lot of people are feeling politically homeless right now. They're feeling disillusioned and overwhelmed and uncertain. What is one thing that they could do, one actionable item that they could do, besides going out and getting your book and reading it and talking about it with their friends and family? But what's one thing that they could do to help them feel a little bit less rudderless?
It's It's not an easy question. It's not an easy question because the situation feels hopeless. So my one thing for your audience to take away is that do not lose hope, but don't be misled with the parties, with the current politicians. Better system is available and it's within grasp, it's within our power. All we need to do is educate ourselves, take more responsibility. And next time your audience are at a ballot box voting, think about it. Think about it. Why is your loyalty to this party? How well has this party served you in the past? How well have they served us? Are they serving the public or the good of the elite, entrenched elite? Are we getting poorer or richer? Are the elite getting poorer or richer? So we know successive governments, they have been working for this elite class. And therefore, just take a step back, question your loyalty to any party, reds or the blues, and look at democracy and vote for the independence, encourage independence. And I would go along with what you say, despite the economic difficulty, financial difficulty that most families are in, let's have a fund that we're not going to be able to match Apex or these Musk and billionaires and Bezos's, what have you, but let's have a fund. And there are great people in both United Kingdom and United States that can get this movement going, that we can have a national fund that takes £5 from each independent thinking voter and choose certain number of constituencies that are likely to be won at first step by the independents. And if we can get half a dozen independents into the House, then that will tilt this small balance in the House and we'll start getting our voices heard. And system needs to take us more seriously, the independents more seriously. And that will be the beginning of end for the party system. It will start unraveling. It will lose this legitimacy. It's just there's light at under the tunnel, although it may not seem like it, but it starts with you, the voter, to take action. Don't leave it to the next person to say, well, what am I going to be able to do? If we all did that, we all be living under kingdoms now, kings and queens, not in a democratic society. So let's honor our ancestors and fight for this precious thing called democracy, is my say. Sorry, it wasn't one thing, it was one thing, a long one thing. But that's what I would want your audiences to take away from them. They have the power.
I love that. I really do. I think it's important to acknowledge that and to not lose hope in all of this because it can be overwhelming. So thank you for being on the show today. We'll make sure to put all of your links and everything and the link to the book and the show notes so people can go check it out. And thank you for tuning in to What Do We Do Next? You know, I appreciate you guys spending time with me every week. I hope these interviews are helpful and they give you a little bit of inspiration. And please go check out the book. Go donate $5 and maybe start having deeper conversations in your peer groups, right? The next time you're with your friends, say, well, what do you guys think about independence? And really talk about things, talk it out. Because we're in an all or nothing society right now. And if you say, well, I don't know if I would vote for Kamala if she ran again, and then they'll come for your neck like, oh, well, you're single-handedly destroying the United States if you don't vote. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of that stuff. Let's talk about why it's that way. Let's talk about some of the solutions. Let's talk about the alternatives, because we can't blame people and we can't play this game anymore, and you can't force people to choose the lesser of two evils, because where has that gotten us? Where has that gotten us? It's gotten us nowhere good in the last 10 years, and there's not a single American who doesn't feel it, except for the elite and the ultra wealthy. They're in a different place, but the rest of us schlubs are feeling it more and more every single year. So On that note, thank you for tuning in. Please go vote local, vote independent, vote non-party, vote whatever you want to vote, but just vote. And do your research, because those people in your local elections are the ones that actually impact your everyday life, more so than anybody at the top of the food chain. But it all starts there, and maybe you're supposed to be the one in that seat. And that's why you haven't been compelled to vote yet. So on that note, thank you for tuning in. Metin, thank you so much for being on the show today. And
thank you. My absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. And we will catch you guys on the next one. Until then, please be excellent to each other. Vote. Don't take any shit from people on the internet. And if they do, you send them to me. I'll take care of it. And until then, I'll catch you next time.